So, I have a question for you guys. So we're gonna start the Tetrabiblos reading group, and it's the introduction to the Tetrabiblos is what we're gonna start with. Now, the reason I think we should start with the introduction to the Tetrabiblos is, Kim, now how much do you know about the Tetrabiblos?
Not a lot, but I do have that book.
Oh, you do?
Where is?
Somewhere.
Yeah,
Do you have this book, Shane?
Nope,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Okay.
I've got it, but I don't know where I put it.
Okay, well, we'll all get sorted. I mean, these reading groups go on for a long time. I mean, we're going to be reading these whole textbooks, and the reason that I set up the Tetrabiblos reading group is, I know that you have an interest in Hellenistic Kim, and like Shane does too, and I do too. And the thing is that Vedius Valens gets all the publicity, like because that was kind of a controversial text, and he's kind of a scorpionic astrologer, and but the Tetrabiblos was constantly talked about by the ancient authors as being the most philosophical and hard to understand of all of the ancient texts. And so I waited after I've translated all of Valens, and I waited years, and then I translated the Tetrabiblos because I was like, okay, I've read all this Greek, now I can understand Ptolemy. But the first book I ever translated was the Introduction to the Tetrabiblos by Porphyry of Tyre, and this one is actually was really feasible for me to do because it was in these little sections, and this was when I
Right,
was really
right.
learning Greek.
Yeah.
This book actually won an award. It got an independent book publisher award, so it's actually a really good book, and it's never been contested. I've never been involved in any controversies over this book because it's the only existing translation that exists. And the way that I got ensoulment was I found my name on this religious scholar site, and they were trying to commission someone to translate the introduction to the Tetrabiblos. And someone's like, "Oh, this woman already did." And so I showed up and I was like, "Hi, this is Andrea Gehrz, and yeah, I translated this. And is there anything else you need translated?" And this religious scholar sent me ensoulment, written by Porphyry of Tyre also, and he's like, this has never been translated into English. And so that took me, so that's how I got Ensoulment, was from this book because they're written by the same
Oh,
author.
oh, how fortuitous.
So isn't that cool? So Porphyry of Tyre was actually a Neoplatonic philosopher. So
Right.
he studied under Plato, but he wrote books on everything from like vegetarianism to ensoulment to this technical text. And so this isn't, he was a philosopher, but he wrote the introduction to the Tetrabiblos. So it's like it's supposed to clarify the Tetrabiblos
Yes,
because the Tetrabiblos is so hard to understand.
yes,
So I don't know if you guys agree, but I think we should start with the introduction to the Tetrabiblos and then go to the
yes.
Tetrabiblos.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd
Okay.
be great. I'm just here. I'm trying to figure out where all my books are.
So
Heck with
do
it.
do you guys want to read the acknowledgments, or is that not a page we want to read?
Nah, just
Okay.
get into meat and potatoes.
Okay. So the table of contents, I'm going to read you some of the table of contents just so you get a feel for this book. There's the introduction, the things signified by the revolutions of the sun, moon, and the remaining planets, the places in which the planets reach apogee and perigee, nocturnal and diurnal planets, the naming of certain zones and signs to the specific planets, exaltation, testimony. So he basically went chapter by chapter and kind of elucidated concepts that come up in Valens, that come up in other Hellenistic books. So this is an amazing textbook to read. It's actually awesome. And so just like in the Tetrabiblos, there's all these chapters like exaltations and things like this. This guy did chapters about those things too. So that's the kind of textbook we're looking at.
Right.
Okay. Do you want to read the introduction to the text?
What whatever you want to do, Andy. Just
Okay.
yeah.
Shane, what do you think? I mean, I think it kind of fixes the text in so that we know what we're reading. I think we should read it all personally.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So I'll read a paragraph and then we'll stop and see if anyone wants to say anything, okay?
Okay.
Remember, you're on TV and we're producing this for all astrologers across the lands. Great.
So behave is what I just heard.
No, don't behave. That makes bad TV.
All right.
Read yourselves. Okay. Introduction to the text. The introduction to the Tetrabiblos of Ptolemy is actually a compilation of ideas from a number of ancient astrological authors, written by an author who would also be considered ancient to the modern reader. While there has been much debate over the true authorship of this text, it has been generally attributed to the philosopher Porphyry of Tyre. Regardless of who actually wrote this introduction, it is an important text in the context of the history of astrology, in that it seems to have been written in an attempt to clarify certain astrological concepts that still remained unclear at the time. As the title suggests, the introduction to the Tetrabiblos was intended to accompany and clarify the Tetrabiblos of Claudius Ptolemy, who lived 100 to 175 CE. Ptolemy wrote two important texts pertaining to the history of astrology, the Tetrabiblos and the Almagest. Have you guys heard of the Almagest?
No.
Okay. What do you know about it, Shane?
I've seen it in forums talking about translated books or ancient astrology books, but that's all I know. I've seen the name, that's it.
So this is actually really important. So Ptolemy, who wrote the Tetrabiblos, also wrote the Almagest. Now, the Almagest is an ancient astronomical treatise. So he not only wrote on astrology, he also wrote on astronomy. And so this is actually really important for us as Hellenistic astrologers to say Ptolemy, the most godlike Ptolemy, as people called him, also wrote on astronomy. So in the ancient times, astronomy and astrology were both considered relevant and important topics. And in fact, Ptolemy was not an astrologer, he was a professor.
Uh,
Does that make sense?
yeah.
Okay. While the Almagest focused solely on mathematics of astronomy, the Tetrabiblos focused on astrology. In the Tetrabiblos, Ptolemy addressed a variety of topics, including nocturnal and diurnal charts, aspects, conception charts, and even a method for which one could calculate the native's length of life.
Yeah.
Sounds like Kim already did that one.
Yeah.
The Tetrabiblos is quite extensive and at times hard to understand. Thus, Porphyry compiled this text in order to clarify the concepts presented in the Tetrabiblos by using the words of other astrologers before his time, including Antiochus of Athens, Thrasyllus, Timaeus, Pedosiris, Apollinaris, and of course Ptolemy. So it sounds like in this intro that he refers to a bunch. What they would do is they'd go to this library in Alexandria, which eventually burned down, and they would read all these ancient texts and then compile them and what they'd
Right.
found. So I'm pretty sure Porphyry spent his time in this Alexandria library reading books.
Right. Right.
Any comments on that paragraph? Okay. Porphyry himself was a Neoplatonic philosopher who lived somewhere between the years of 234 and 305 CE. So he lived like 100 years after Ptolemy. Approximately 60 works have been attributed to him on subjects ranging from religion to philosophy to musical theory to astrology. Some of his titles include The Life of Pythagoras, On Abstinence from Eating Food from Animals, The Life of Plotinus, and On the Cave of the Nymphs. Astrology was only one of the many subjects about which Porphyry wrote. Okay.
Right. He also wrote a book, Porphyry Against the Christians.
Hmm.
Yeah. I've got that book somewhere.
Do you know anything about that book?
I haven't.
Hmm.
Yeah. I'll send you a link.
Okay,
where
sure.
I got it.
I probably won't have time to read it, but I do think
No.
but I think it would be cool to hear. This is why we all share our knowledge. Is like we could learn if you perused it. Maybe you could teach us in this forum what he wrote. Because studying Porphyry is a really cool idea as we read this book.
Right.
Okay, it'll give you something to do before next week.
Okay.
If you find it. Okay. The specific source text I have used for this translation is a critical edition of Porphyry's Introduction to Tetrabiblos, which was compiled, edited, and published in 1940 by German scholars Emily Bohr and Stephen Weinstock. The manuscript itself can be found in Book 5, Part 4 of the Catalogus Codicum Astrologorum Gregorium. It's called the CCAG. You guys can find the CCAG online anytime. You just look it up, and it's got all these Greek texts in it. So it's like that's what we work from, is what are called critical editions. And a critical edition is all these scholars went through and they were like, okay, there's something missing from this edition, and this edition has this, and so they make a critical edition. It's almost like a definitive edition. Emily Bohr was a student of Franz Boll, a German scholar who extensively studied Ptolemy's works, as well as biographical information about Ptolemy's life. When Boll died in 1924, Bohr carried on his work and eventually published the critical edition, which has been used for the translation. In their Latin introduction to this text, Bohr and Weinstock bring up the objection by historians that Porphyry was not the true author. The objections they address seem to have been derived from the fact that Porphyry was a Neoplatonic philosopher and a disciple of Plotinus, with whom he lived and studied for 6 years. Neoplatonists in general, and Plotinus included, did indeed have some objections to astrology. In his translations of Plotinus, A.H. Armstrong notes that Plotinus didn't necessarily admonish astrology altogether, but instead had specific objections to the manner in which astrologers observe the planets in respect to earthly life. Plotinus believed that astrologers exaggerated the effects of the planets, that they separated the influence of the planets from the totality of the universe, and he also found some of their techniques to be unscientific. Sounds like today.
Yeah.
It is because of these objections by his teacher Plotinus and Neoplatonists in general that Porphyry originally had been doubted by historians as the true author of this text.
Good.
Any comments there? Okay. I do think
They had fact checkers back then.
it's true. I think this is so cool to learn about the text. It makes it a lot more meaningful when we read it, you know?
Yeah.
Okay. Since the year that this text was published, there has been further discussion about who wrote it, and some historians propose that different sections should be attributed to different authors. In his article, From Alexandria to Baghdad to Byzantium, The Transmission of Astrology, David Pingree argues that Porphyry was indeed the true author of sections 1 through 45, which also shows a remarkable parallel to Antiochus of Athens, who I always wonder if that's Valens, because it's Vettius Valens of Antioch. I'm like, what? I don't know. But that's just me tripping. Okay, an author from which Porphyry seemed to have derived much of his information. In general, Porphyry's introduction to the Tetrabiblos is thought to be one of 3 existing commentaries on the Tetrabiblos, along with the commentary by a Neoplatonic philosopher named Proclus, and also the notes that have been added to the Porphyry text by an editor named Demophilus. Demophilus was a later astrologer who lived and wrote in Constantinople around 990 CE. There are indeed scholia that appear in the footnotes of the critical edition, which are little notes in the critical edition, which have been translated here and included as an appendix, with the references in the body of the text appearing as capital letters and parentheses. Pingree suggests that sections 47 through 52 of Porphyry were most likely additions made by Demophilus. I'll keep reading if you guys want me to
Oh,
stop.
keep
interrupt me.
going.
Okay. Bohr and Weinstock mentioned that they were unsure as to whether or not the scholia were actually written by Demophilus or perhaps by an earlier author, Theophilus. According to Pingree, Theophilus was an author and translator who was born in Edessa around 695 CE. The main concept to understand here is that the true author or authors of this text are entirely unclear. Most likely, Porphyry was the true author of a large portion of the text, but not the entirety of the text, and exactly who wrote the other portions has not yet been clarified. One last thing to mention is that sections 46 and 50 through 55 are stylistically different than all other sections, and thus these also might have been commentary by a later author. Pingree also argues that these sections should not be attributed to Porphyry. Now, David Pingree was, I don't want to speak out of line. Can we see who David Pingree was? Like, can we Google him? He was a Greek, what do you find there? He was a Greek, I'm not sure who David Pingree was, but I know he was huge in the history of astrology. Where's our historical team lead?
Is it Pinkney?
Pingree, Pingree.
Pingree.
I've heard that word before.
Yeah, he comes up a lot in astrological history.
Right.
Well, there's a David Pingree who is a Extreme sports racer. Probably not the guy that does this though. He was an American historian of mathematics in the ancient world. Professor at Brown University.
Yeah. Okay.
The Wikipedia article is a little bit sparse.
Okay. Okay, so he was a professor and he worked on a lot of these ancient texts, making the critical editions and things like that. So, that's who that is. Okay. By virtue of the fact that Porphyry had written a compilation here, there are a variety of verb tenses that appear in the text, which in English translate to a range of different pronouns. Many of the short sections use the third person singular verb form, which was literally translated to he said or he says. I assume that Porphyry is meaning either Ptolemy or Antiochus in these sections, but it is not at all clear to whom Porphyry is referring. In other sections, the third person plural verb form is used, which translates as they said or they say, and still it is unclear to whom they are referring. The Greek is like that. It would be like they said this, they said he said this, and you're like, I have no idea who that is. My general approach has been to make this text readable, and thus I have aimed for fluency in these situations by using natural English constructions such as passive voice or more general voice. I do, however, feel it necessary to make mention of these variations for the reader who might have a knowledge of Greek language or history and might want to inquire further into such intricate matters. Moreover, there are places in which the first person singular and plural verbs have been used, and in these places I have found it pertinent to preserve the original forms, or thus have translated these sentences with the pronouns I or we. In these parts of the text, I have assumed that Porphyry or another author is making his own additional commentary, which is why I felt it essential to maintain the integrity of the verbs in these places. Okay, this is almost done. I should also make mention of the fact that in the Greek text there's no variation in typography, meaning that the text within almost every section is essentially composed of one long paragraph. The Greek is just like, it's just like you'll see like a wall of Greek with like no formatting. So I'm just like looking at this like, what is that? And so then it ends up being a formatted book in the end. It's just trippy. I have made divisions between paragraphs here in an attempt to make the text readable, but by no means is this construction mimicking the actual format of the critical edition. Lastly, I have made a stylistic decision to include the Greek headings in the body of the text alongside the English translations of these headings. Accordingly, I've also italicized the English words that are representative of the Greek concepts being illustrated in each section, in order that the reader can compare the Greek words in the headings with the italicized English words in each section. In this way, the reader can compare the terms and engage in a deeper layer of understanding of the Greek source text. Okay, so this might not seem like that big of a deal, but you remember yesterday when we were reading Vedic Valens and he goes, the planets come together in enclosement, the casting of rays. Oh, you remember that list of all of those? Well, check
Yeah.
this out. Here's section 24, the casting of rays.
Huh.
And
Oh,
and so I included the Greek
wow.
because you remember how Riley used a different word for it. Well, I'm like, okay, if you're looking back into the Greek, you can see that this word aktinoboleos can be translated. And so that's why they were saying that one person had to translate all these ancient texts, because I had to make a decision here and then put that in the Valens and vice versa, you know? So it's like that the casting of rays is right there. Isn't that cool?
Yeah,
So that's what we're going to be learning in this book, is all those basic terms.
right. Right. Well, if you don't mind me just making a statement, you can take it for good or bad, but Kepler school should make you president.
Whoa, I'm so flattered.
You know, because
Yeah. I would
I don't like today's astrology. Just don't like it.
well, you like this astrology. I think you're a great Hellenist so far. It's like you're
Yeah.
really like this stuff.
Well, see, the thing about it is I went to a little psychic fair and I did one reading for a lady and it she paid me for her daughter's chart. And basically I said, what are you concerned about for her? Or what is she concerned about? And so anyway, when I pulled it, her north node's in the uh, uh, 12th house. Can't remember the sign, but anyway, reading Schulman's book on karmic astrology. She's basically getting out of work, 6th house, or being a slave, and need to go be more into the subconscious, if that's right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. But see, I never told her it was a north node. I never talked astrology.
Mm.
I just put it in a way that, oh, I know you, and you'll this is your life path,
Mm. Yeah,
Like,
well, I mean, I think you're a very good astrologer in that fashion because, astrologers are technical philosophers, and it's like we don't have
right,
to use the technical part of our philosophy. We can just, philosophize about what we saw in the chart. We don't have to give all the technicals.
right. Well, most of those people don't know it anyway, and you just confuse them.
Exactly.
And it's if you look at astrology sort of like the tarot, it's the journey of the hero. And that's why tarot and astrology together can really work,
Right.
and but I'm just saying that uh the astrology information is for me, not them.
Mhm. Well, I think you're speaking, and that this is kind of a different class, but you're speaking to the idea that we should speak to the language level of our receiver. And I actually agree with you. And I think that makes you a really good astrologer because a lot of people go reading a chart, giving all this technical information to somebody who doesn't know that. And that's actually an error in astrology reading. You know what
Right,
I mean? So
right.
I think you're doing great as far as that. And this is a nice little commercial break between the next section. So now we're going to go into the introduction to the Greek and Ptolemaic cosmology. So
Oh,
the reason I wrote this introduction section is because I was trying to get everything out in just the translation itself, but I realized that the Greek cosmology is so different that we have to like kind of understand it before we can really understand the textbook. So this is what I would call framing, and I think we should read this because it's framing the whole textbook.
right,
I almost want to release this video to the crowd for free, like so that everyone can get the introduction to this book because then they would know what they're reading,
right.
That's okay with you guys.
Oh yeah.
Bad idea.
Okay, let's do that after this today. We'll just release this for free. Okay. Introduction to the Greek and Ptolemaic cosmology. When trying to understand Hellenistic astrology, it is very important to understand how Greek astronomers and astrologers understood the cosmos as a whole. This information is crucial in comprehending the manner in which the ancient astrologers constructed an astrological chart. I will not delve into all the intricacies of the Greek cosmology here, such as the epicycles and exact calculations, but instead I will attempt to provide an explanation that is pertinent specifically to astrology. For more information on these specific topics, the reader may want to consult the Almagest specifically, or a book such as Michael J. Crow's Theories of the World from Antiquity to the Copernican Revolution. As is illustrated in the Almagest, Ptolemy's extensive work on astronomy, the ancient Greeks perceived the heavens as being spherical in shape, with the unmoving earth situated in the center of this sphere. This sphere was thought to revolve around the earth, rising up in the east and setting in the west once each day, and the planets were thought to rise up on the eastern horizon and set in the west along the sphere during its daily revolution around the earth. So they knew that the sun rises and then it sets. It rises and it sets, and all the stars rise and they set. And that's what you see in the chart is above here is the diurnal planets because you can see them in the daytime. And then anything down here is the nocturnal or nighttime because it's under the earth. So this horizon line is like rises and sets, okay? Ptolemy also described a planetary motion that countered the motion of the spherical rising and setting. As he described in Book 1, Section 1 of the Almagest, there are two different primary motions in the heavens. One of them is that which carries everything from east to west. It rotates them with an unchanging and uniform motion along the circular parallel to each other. The other motion is that by which the spheres of the stars perform movements in the opposite sense to the first motion. The second motion that Ptolemy mentions is the opposite motion along which the planets travel through the zodiac and increase in zodiacal longitude, the sun moving 1 degree a day, the moon traveling 13 degrees, Mercury moving approximately 1 degree, etc. So let me explain that. This is why the professor's in the room, because that's kind of like hard to understand. Okay, so there's two motions in the heavens. One is the rising and setting of all the planets. It goes this way, okay? And we want to, when we look at a chart, we want to understand that when we see the sun near the ascendant, we want to know that the sun is rising like that. And then it goes up to noon where the midheaven is, and then it comes down to the setting point. And so we see that motion like this. Well, the planets also walk around in the opposite motion. So in the transits go this way, right? Like, so if we say the sun is at 5 degrees Gemini, well, tomorrow it's at 6 degrees Gemini, and then it's at 7 degrees Gemini, and then it's at 8 degrees Gemini. And that's going this way. Okay.
Right.
So they say
Yep.
there's two motions in the heavens. One goes up like this, and one comes around like this.
Right. But now, seeing this video, you're the direction you're using, the video makes it not correct, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's opposite.
It has the opposite. So yeah.
Totally.
Right.
Well, why this is helpful and what I hope you guys take from this is when I draw a chart by hand, I definitely know that where the sun is and the moon are in the sky, like because of these, like visualizing everything in these motions of the heavens. Like, let's say we see a moon is above, it's up in the 10th house. You actually know that when that baby was born, the moon had literally risen up and was right above head, right? Like, so that's what I learned from this. I was like, oh, that's what that chart is showing, is that rising and setting of all the planets that way, and then the walking around this way. And it's actually a visual thing because all the ancient Greeks were looking up and looking around. They weren't necessarily looking at the same tools,
Right.
right? Any comments or questions about that stuff?
Well, I've always been I've been trying to explore. Okay, my son, according to Porphyry, is in the third house. It's on the it's in the third house, and my rising sign is Sagittarius, but they say that the rising sign is the ruler of your chart. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So in other words, I'll have Sagittarius themes, but I start out at the third house. In other words, I learn communication, and then it goes to the second house, dealing with your possessions. That's going to be the theme of your life. Eventually, if you get 84, your third Saturn return, you might get wiser.
Well, you bring up something interesting in there, which is the porphyry house systems. Like, I'm always wondering, like, what did the porphyry house systems have to do with porphyry of Tyre? I mean, that's a good question, don't you think?
Yeah, there's that's why in astrology we should learn where these house systems come from and who propagated them. Does that make sense?
Sure, I agree.
Yeah,
with
right. Because if you, the biggest limitation of astrology is deciding which house system you want to use. And I think once you get to know the creator of that house system, and I like him, and I don't like that guy, and so knowing the history of these house systems would be really should be a subject to be taught.
Yeah, Totally. Yeah, we were gonna have a house systems class, but it just didn't go. But I'm getting better at marketing now. I just starting to live on video all day and it seems to work better. Like I think I was trying to Facebook everything, but maybe we'll try the houses class again.
Yeah.
A lot of us at this school, including probably you, Kim, are kind of a little too advanced for the house system class. Not that we know everything there is to know about the house systems class, but I think a lot of us have already done that struggle about house systems. And so, I mean, you'd be surprised how advanced the students at the Moira Press are. Like what that's what we work with is usually really advanced astrologers. So it's like a lot of us are already like wrestled with house systems. But yeah, I think it's always a worthy study. Okay. The Greek image of the cosmos then matches directly with the image that an astrologer sees when he or she looks at an astrological chart. The circle of the zodiac is representing the circular shape of the sphere that was thought to rise and set around the earth. And thus, the construction of the basic template of the astrological chart, including the ascendant, descendant, midheaven, and nadir, and the houses, is derived specifically from this idea of the first motion of the heavenly sphere. People wonder why I know how to draw charts so well. I swear it's from reading these ancient books because I'm like, sun's rising, sun's setting. When the moon's here, it looks like this. I actually know what I can predict what the moon looked like, past predict. Like the baby was born with a crescent moon in the 11th house. Like I like it, but it comes from reading all these ancient books. So as we move along, you guys will get good at that stuff too. It's I don't know. They got used to the look. You get used to looking up basically. And thus, God, I shouldn't have said I was good at drawing charts. God, sometimes I make an accidentally narcissistic statement. Um, but it's better than false humility,
Yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't worry about it because I'm better than you.
I'm gonna have you draw my chart later. Okay. Thanks, Kim.
I can be narcissistic.
Yeah. You make me laugh. Okay. Narcissists are us. Okay, here we go. And thus the construction of the basic template of the chart, okay, is derived specifically from this idea of the first motions of the heavenly sphere. Ptolemy even mentions in the Almagest that the 6 zodiacal signs were thought to be visible above the horizon at any given time, while 6 signs were thought to be hidden under the horizon. This accounts for the ascendant axis line that splits a nativity in half. If the modern reader can thus imagine the chart as it was thought to represent this heavenly sphere, then the manner in which the Hellenistic astrologers constructed a chart becomes entirely clear. Okay, I'm going to ask you guys something. Is the sun at the center of the cosmos, or is the earth at the center of the cosmos?
Is that a trick question?
Pretty much.
It depends. I think that if we're talking Hellenistic astrology, the Earth is at the center of the cosmos.
That's where we get geo
Instead
thing
of
in astrology.
When was the Enlightenment?
That was
Can we Google that? When I forgot the year of the Enlightenment. But isn't that when they realized
it was after 1200.
Okay. Wasn't that when they realized the sun was at the center of everything?
I don't know.
I want to say that I want to say heliocentric was before the Enlightenment, but it's been a long time since I went over that. The Enlightenment was 1600s, so
Yeah.
17th and 18th century.
Didn't Galileo get in a bunch of trouble for saying that the sun was at the center of things?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like the Indigo Girls wrote a song about that. Come on.
Yeah.
Galileo's head was on the block. Comes into the truth. So I think the ancient Greeks were standing on Earth looking up at the sun and moon, and that's why they would draw the chart with a circle in the center. That's the Earth, and then everything above that Earth is up above the chart, and everything below the Earth is in the bottom half of the chart. And so astrology is Earth centered from at least drawing the chart, that perspective.
Yeah,
Yes.
Copernicus proposed heliocentric in 1500s.
Yeah. Mhm.
It's a century before the Enlightenment.
Okay, you see why I had to do this chapter on the Greek cosmology? Because we have to understand that the Greeks didn't know that the sun was at the center of the earth or of the cosmos. To them the earth was at the center, so they drew charts in that fashion, and that's why charts look like that. Okay? So I really want you to get earth centered about your astrology because according to a chart drawing, it is the earth at the center.
Right. Right.
Okay. A perfect example of the Greek astrological way of explaining a nativity in respect to the first motion of the cosmos can be seen in section 30 at the end of paragraph 6 when Porphyry writes the phrase, ooh, I get to read you guys some Greek. Ton epanapheromenon toe mesorin nomati. That was some Greek. It says the phrase literally means to rise up after the midheaven. And in reference to an astrological chart, this describes a planet in the 11th house. So they would say a planet in the house rises up after the midheaven. So they would say the midheaven rose up and then it's rising up, and then all of a sudden this planet's rising behind it and it's in the 11th. See that?
Right. Right.
That's how the Greek would talk. It'd be like, we're rising up after the midheaven, or we're rising up after the ascendant, or whatever.
Right.
In order to think like a Greek astrologer, then, the reader must imagine this first movement of the sphere of the heavens rising up in the east, carrying along with it the midheaven, or in this case, the whole sign 10th house. Okay. And as it rises up on the celestial sphere, a planet rises up after it. This would then put a planet that is rising up after the midheaven in the 11th house. Another example of this motion of the celestial sphere can be seen in the section by use of the phrases such as the planets being in the east or declining in the west. These examples are specifically referring to planets being stronger when they are near the point of ascending above the horizon and being weaker when they are near setting under the horizon. So they would say it's ascending and it's really strong. That's why it's really strong in the first house, because it's ascending. But then it goes all the way up and it's declining in the west. So in the 7th house, it's supposed to be a lot weaker than the ascendant because it's declining. Okay.
Yeah. It's just going into the underworld.
Absolutely. It's sinking under the earth. Good job.
Hmm. It's more of a chthonic. Is that the proper word?
Never heard that word.
It's like the goddess Hecate. Okay, she was an ally of Zeus. Okay, and uh, it if you read about her, she's um dealing with the boundary between uh the living and the dead. And so in astrology, you could look at like my sun is opposite my midheaven. Okay, so I really won't didn't understand my midheaven until later on in life, and you sometimes have to go under to see uh, basically to see where you're heading.
Interesting.
Yeah, because there's only been I think two people that in myth that came back from the dead. Persephone and I want to say Dionysius, but I don't remember. I hope I didn't confuse you.
No. I'm not afraid of you. Hey, is that a tattoo of your chart on your arm?
Uh, this right here?
Is that the cross of matter?
Yeah. Mhm.
The lot of fortune?
This is chaos.
Oh, that's chaos. Fascinating. You're so
This is my
cool.
this is my predominant hand. So, ooh,
Ah, I love being in the room with a magician. No wonder it's so magical in here. I thought it
yeah,
was Shane because he's my boyfriend, but no, it's Kim because he's a
yeah. Well, what it was is that I got drunk and tattooed. I said I want something that uh, basically um, dealt with. Well, see, my mother always wanted me to be like Jesus, so these are where the scars are on Jesus's hands.
Wow, fascinating. Man, this is you're making some good TV for us, Kim. This is great TV. All right. All right. There's a lively bunch here on the Moira Press. Okay. There are also references in the Hellenistic astrology of the second and opposing motions in the heavens. This motion is often mentioned by use of Greek terms for a planet that is preceding and a planet that is following. In the modern astrological chart, this would refer to planets that are ahead or behind one another in terms of zodiacal longitude. So it would always be like this planet's preceding this planet and this planet's following this planet. And what that is when they're rising up, it's like this rises up first and then this rises up. So like it might be that the ascendant or like the sun rises up and then Mercury rises up behind it, which is a one version of Mercury. Or it could be that Mercury rises up first and then the sun rises up. And so that they would talk a lot about like which rises up first. And there's like it's been years since I read this book, but it's like night Mercury and day Mercury, because if Mercury rises before the sun, it's a day Mercury, and so then it's of the diurnal sect. And then if it rises at night, you can see Mercury, and if that's behind the sun, and so it has a different flavor. So those were important to them, which rose first.
Correct.
Okay. These terms are specifically describing the degrees along the zodiac from which or to which the planets are traveling. An example of this can be found in section 24 on the casting of rays. Porphyry writes, the leading planet in an aspect casts a ray onto the planet behind it. For example, a planet in Aries casts a ray by square to a planet in Capricorn, and by trine onto a planet in Sagittarius. It can be seen here that the leading planet is leading in terms of zodiacal longitude. Oh, so it's that zodiacal longitude is where is it on the ecliptic? It's like what degree is it? So it's saying like if it's in Capricorn, it casts a ray back to its leading. Then I don't know. There's something about like which planet is over where is leading or following.
Well, doesn't that depend on the speed of the planets?
Good question.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because my Jupiter is went past Uranus in the 8th house because Jupiter is faster than Uranus. So that would lead to another interpretation.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, they totally would look into the speed of planets for sure. And yeah, we'll probably end up on sections about that. It can be seen here that the leading planet is leading in terms of zodiacal longitude. In terms of the planets moving through the zodiac, it is further along in the cycle than the planet in the back. It can be seen that the Greek astronomers and astrologers imagined the heavens in a manner very different from the modern astrologer, and thus, it is very useful to have an understanding of the astronomical worldview from which the modern chart has been derived. When the modern astrologer looks at an astrological chart, the chart itself does not appear to match the modern heliocentric understanding of the heavens. It does, however, replicate the ancient Greek view of the cosmos. And in this way, a glimpse into the history provides very enlightening to the modern practitioner of the astrological arts. When you look at your chart, Kim, what do you think? What program do you use to look at your chart?
Oh, I just use astro.com.
Me too. That's what I love.
I've got gold, but that thing is so complicated I just give up on it.
Yeah. So did you know when you were looking at a chart that the Earth was at the center? Did you know that?
Did I repeat that?
Did you know when you look at your chart that the Earth is at the center of it?
Yes, because of the word geocentric.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Okay, cool. And did you know that your sun being where it is in Pisces means that it had set under the horizon and it was like right here at birth?
Right. Correct. In a sense, what would I be a Pisces at midheaven?
Yeah.
And I'm still working on that. Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, you know what's crazy is the next section, which we'll probably have to stop after, is an introduction to the aspects and beams. You remember yesterday in the Valens group, the casting of rays came up and we were all wondering what they thought. Well, this little 2-page section describes that. So
Yeah.
this is cool.
Yeah. Well, you did all right, Andy.
You know, I try, Kim, I try.
Oh, no. Come believe in yourself here.
Okay.
Why would an old man, I mean, yeah, you look good and everything, but Why would an old man want to learn astrology from a young person?
Because my chart is made to do it?
Nah. No, it's just that I'm an old guy, and something told me one time that if you'll shut up, I'll tell you everything you want to know. And it's hard for me to shut up.
I like when you talk. Okay, let's get through this section and then that will be a great show for everyone today. Okay, introduction to aspects and beams. It is also necessary to understand the manner in which the ancient astrologers understood and described aspects. In Hellenistic astrology, planets were said to cast rays onto one another, which essentially meant that they were thought to send out planetary beams into the cosmos, which may or may not happen upon another planet. Porphyry first illustrates this idea at the end of section 9 in his description of right-handed and left-handed aspects. He mentions that there are 7 beams released by each of the planets, 3 that phase upwards or north, 3 that go downwards or south, and 1 that shines exactly across to the opposite point. So have you ever looked at the moon and seen the 7 beams coming out of the moon before?
What? Not no, but I'm going to go look just because I've never heard that before. So.
Yeah, it's cool. Okay, this Hellenistic planetary beam theory also is pertinent in section 16 on intervention, the section in which Porphyry suggests that planetary rays can be thrown between other planets, which in turn affects the outcomes of these planets. An understanding of planetary ray theory may also be useful in thinking about concepts such as aspects making an equal-sided line, an idea which is present in section 10 on transmission. It says, when the planets make an equal-sided line, and what it means is when they're exactly opposite and their beams come out and make an equal line.
Right.
If the planets were thought to send out beams into the cosmos and an aspect were to become exact, then this beam could also thought to be create a geometric line in the cosmos. So you know how when a plant, like when an opposition's like this, it's not, it's like maybe an opposition's 172 degrees, right? They would say that it's the beams don't quite mingle. But when
Right.
it's in the orb, the beams start to mingle.
Right. Right.
Is that how you envision aspects, or what do you?
Yes, because I have a couple of oppositions, and
See you tomorrow, okay?
okay, see you, sweetie. Okay, that was my niece. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
so that's how you see oppositions?
Well, I only give it 3 degrees.
Is that
Okay.
because in the ancient text they say 3?
Uh, well, no, I'm just comfortable with that. But is it applying or is it, is that word the other word to that?
Separate,
Is it applying opposition?
right?
See that's yeah.
Yeah, applying or separating is a big one. Okay.
Yep.
Ancient Greek optical theory is also of interest in that Porphyry and other Hellenistic astrologers often used visual references for planetary phenomena. Planets were often said to behold one another, while certain signs were said to be able to see one another. A good example of this can be seen in section 24 on the casting of rays. In this section, Porphyry compares the idea that some planets cast rays while other planets merely look upon one another. In fact, Porphyry even suggests the idea that planets that cast rays are destructive, while planets that look upon one another are not. Further research into this topic seems to explain why Hellenistic astrologers so often use vision as a metaphor in their descriptions of astrological concepts, especially in terms of aspects. In ancient Greek, it was a common idea that the visual perception occurred on the account of a visual beam that extended out from the eye of the beholder onto the object being perceived. And in this manner, vision worked quite nicely as a comparison in terms of aspects and beams. So in order for me to see this, broken nail clippers, I have to cast a beam out of my eye onto it. There's a beam, I'm gonna cast a beam onto my cat Merlin. Okay. No, but do you see what I'm saying? This came up in Valens yesterday. Remember that, Shane?
Yep.
Yeah, I was wondering now if maybe this has something to do with those bits and valens on like this sign shines on this part of the land.
Mm, interesting. Where he he fixes the sign on the land, like so maybe
Right.
it shines down. Wow,
Sounds
interesting.
interesting.
Okay. All right, we have one more paragraph. This is perfect timing. This common theory that vision occurred on account of beams being sent out by the eyes has been termed the extromissive theory of vision. Both Euclid and Plato were convinced of this theory, as was Ptolemy. According to Mark Smith, in Ptolemy's theory of visual perception, an English translation of the optics, the extromissionists believe that vision was due to a sort of internal fire or flux that issued from the eye to strike an external object. Once touched by the outgoing flux, those objects were visually perceived. So, in a sense, the eye saw the physical world by shedding its own light upon it. Okay, this is actually huge because do you remember in Balance when he said that the sun hits the eyeball and it causes the soul senses machine to turn on?
Really?
Right? So, according to Valens, like the sun lights up our whole, and what modern occultists know is the sun hits your eyes, it goes down to the Ida and the Pingala, which are the energy channels that go down your spine and the cerebral spinal fluid, and then it comes out your chakras, right? And you'll see this later in the ancient texts. They call the chakras palmoi, which are like they're kind of holes in a flute that the planets play, or that they're vibrational resonance places in the body. Like, so they actually knew chakras and light theory, but they would say that the sunlight comes in the eyes, and then we then put the sunlight on the thing, and that's how we see it.
Right.
It's kind of
That's what,
cool.
yeah, there's a whole cult of sun worshippers, and they get up early in the morning and watch the sunrise, and
Hmm.
I don't know what that has to do with it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I love that you're a magician because I feel like you have a lot of the astral magic that's come from the Hermetic texts, like in
Oh,
you, you
oh
know?
yeah, I'm a disciple, yeah,
Yeah.
but I have to prove everything
Well, you don't have
before
to prove it to me. I know you're a magician. I've seen your chart, number one. And number two, you've just said so many magical things since I met you that I know you're a magician. I just feel blessed to be reading this chart with a magician astrologer because like these books were magical and they are scholarly texts, but there's a lot of magic in here if you're looking correctly.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Like nobody's. I don't think anybody has said it, but I understand what Chiron medicine is.
Mm,
And, in the traditional, they didn't have Chiron, okay, but they didn't have cell phones or toilet paper, so we don't need to uh, put down ourselves as modern astrologers. We're just trying to catch up. And so, what
nice.
was I talking about?
You're talking
Yeah,
about magic and how Chiron's magical too, but
yeah.
it's modern magic.
There's some real good grimoires. Christopher Warnock's a very good teacher, and
He's rad, honestly.
he's dedicated himself to that. I'm not much into talismans because I'm not very superstitious.
Mm. Well, yeah. Okay, so let's read the last. We have 2 minutes. Let's read the last little bit here. As can be seen in this quote, both the eyes and the planets were thought to send out beams, and it is most likely for this reason that visual metaphors quite often appeared in Hellenistic texts. Okay. Any comments about that, having read Valens yesterday?
I'm just overwhelmed.
A little bit.
Would you say, Shane?
It seems almost like Schrodinger a little bit.
What is Schrodinger?
Schrodinger is the theory that when you observe something, that's when you understand it.
Right.
Like Schrodinger's cat is if you put a cat in a box and then you pump the box full of like poison gas, is the cat alive or dead? You don't actually know until you look at it. Kind of
Fascinating.
an oversimplified version, I think, but
Well, don't get Shane. Don't give her any ideas about her cat.
Looking at
nah.
the cat right now, and it's very alive. Cutie. You cutie.
My cat is busy observing the meeting.
Yeah, what a nice kitty.
So
She
what
looks
happens
very
when the beams of the cat's eyes land on the meeting?
Yeah,
I would say the meeting becomes more magical because cats are magic.
yeah.
Well, thank you both for being willing to show this to the public. We rarely ever let them in on a classroom ever. We've never really showed them a class and what it looks like, but I think this is a great one because it's a nice introduction to the book as well.
Yeah. Well, I would, if you don't mind me, advertising, I could teach you what Chiron medicine is.
Okay.
I because, you know, I just, you know, there's no cost. You're just a friend.
You mean you could teach people at the school specifically what Chiron medicine is for them? Or
Well,
you wanna, or you mean you want to teach?
not everybody has a gift of healing.
Do you want to stop the recording at this point
Sure.
while we talk about this?